So we're gonna do an uh, an Andor season 2 review of the first 6 episodes so far. So um, if you don't want any spoilers for those 6 episodes, I would recommend stepping away or stopping the VOD now. Um, we are going to talk about some difficult topics today, and I'm going to do something that Star Wars didn't do, which I guess we'll talk about and give you kind of a pre-warning on that too. I'm not going to have an opinion on those specific topics because obviously they're heinous activities. It's more of the presentation for those topics. So you don't have to worry about me going off on some insensitive tangent about sexual assault, spoiler alert, because that's what it is that we're going to be talking about later. But Star Wars, for the first time in the history of its franchise, has attempted to tackle some difficult topics, and they didn't really put a warning on the show at all. So I, wanted to kind of include that as part of our discussion later. I have the tier list up here for one simple reason. I'm gonna list each episode as we go through them on the tier list to as it relates to Andor, not as Star Wars as a whole, for this season. And then at the end of it, I'm going to, and to represent each episode, I'm going to use episode 1 through 6 in Star Wars. So obviously, Phantom Menace is episode 1 and going down to 6. That way we can kind of keep track. It's a little bit hard to, I mean, I could have created a whole tier list for 6 episodes, but it seems kind of silly to waste the time to do that. And then on the bottom one, this Andor one here, will be our final ranking for the season so far and how we think we're going to do. So that being said, let's go into Andor. I had took some notes as I was watching so that I could get my instinctual reaction to each episode as we go. So here we go. Let's see. Let's find episode 1. We'll start it in C. Where is episode 1? There it is. We'll start in C just so you can see where it's at, and we'll move it when we grade it. So, initial just thought of it being back before we go into episode 1 was that I was excited coming in. I know what to expect from Andor, having watched Andor season 1, and I was curious. My initial reaction going into the first episode was, how are they going to address the initial fan divide of this doesn't feel, and it's how I genuinely feel about the show, that it doesn't feel like Star Wars. Um, it feels like a drama set in Star Wars, and to see if they could bridge that gap at all. Because obviously, adult Star Wars fans are not going to have any issue with adult content going into it. But all the people that say Andor is the best show in Star Wars are claiming it's the best show because of its more of a traditional drama and it's very well written, very well acted, and I will definitely not argue that point at all. Um, but where they lose a lot of people is um, with what I was talking about. They just kind of a lot of disconnect that this is no longer a fantasy adventure. This is a drama. And they're very long, politically driven episodes with a lot of darker topics that are, quite frankly, not something George really allowed in his original Star Wars. And when he did, it was very subtle. So it's an interesting show. And I want to just preface from the beginning that I like the show. I think it has a place in Star Wars. I'm just curious of whether it's going too far. So we'll talk about that as we go. And specifically, we're going to hit that hard when we talk about episode 3 here. But let's talk about episode 1. Um, so this one started out with a TIE fighter heist. I think it was a TIE Avenger that Cassian stole. I thought it was very well written at the beginning of it. The dialogue between him and the person helping him set up the theft was amazing and kind of edge of your seat type stuff. I thought it was weird that his escape got so clunkily effed up for someone who's so surgical as Cassian. That they would send someone, and they addressed it later, but the initial reaction was, why did they send Cassian if he had no idea how to fly a tie? Because when he escapes that area, he has no idea how to fly the ship, and he's just running into shit, and he quickly gets the hang of it, which I was also kind of confused with, but he is able to escape. But it was kind of clunky. Mon Mothma, meanwhile, and also just so you're aware of this show, my wife came in and tried to watch for a minute while I was watching the show, and she had no idea she was even watching Star Wars. So that'll give you the idea of like she had no idea what we were watching. And then she also asked when I revealed what the show was, why she hadn't even seen Andor yet. So one of the things with this show is it's called Andor, but he's maybe in it a fourth of the time at most so far. So it's more rebellion, political stuff. Mothma, meanwhile, is setting up her wedding. Krennic is shown for the first time setting up the ISB with propaganda about the planet Gorman, um, telling his highest level people that they're not there for the spiders on Gorman. They're there for, and they're releasing a propaganda video to cover for it. They're there for something else at the core of the planet. It's incredibly important. And then Andor ends up on Yavin, um, crashed in his starfighter, and he's being held captive by the end of the episode by these weird ass rebels that they've used before that are like starving to death kids that are just running a street gang there in the Yavin forests. And that was it. That was the first episode. And when it ended, I was like, wow, I'm glad that they're doing a new format this year, and I kind of talked about it when I reviewed Andor originally. They do kind of like they didn't do it in the first season, but I noticed they had kind of 3 episode arcs throughout the show with a little time passing in between each. And in this year, they were like, we like that formula, we're going to embrace it. So they're releasing the episodes 3 at a time. Now, these are not short. Um, to give you an idea of Skeleton Crew, which is the previous project before this, which by the way was 100% for kids, uh, it was the longest episode was like 40 minutes. Each one of these episodes is a solid 55 minutes. None of them are short. So all those 4 things that happened that I just said took 55 minutes to show, and there was not much to the episode. It would dragged. It was very much setting it up. Now I knew it was a 3 episode arc, but I was like, man, I'm glad that there's 2 more episodes because nothing fucking happened in this episode, and everything that happened I thought was dumb. Um, my initial reaction was like, wow, that was just below average attempt. So I went with D plus for episode 1 of Andor season 2 because I thought it was trying to drive us in the right direction. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. It was driving us in the right direction, but like the Mothma wedding stuff, although intriguing and probably the best part of the first episode, boring. Um, there was I also forgot to mention Bix was shown having a weird dream about the torture she went through, which is important for this story arc. Um, and the gentleman who tortured her, who did not, as far as we know, do anything to her as far as sexual assault goes, was seen crawling into her bed in her dream, attempting to rape her. So she's going through severe PTSD from the torture. And it wasn't shown nothing inappropriate on this one. It was just creepy that that's the route that they went, and it was very like that to me was already a little far for Star Wars, but it was like it was okay. It's passable. You can explain that to a kid, saying, "Oh yeah, he was the one that tortured her. Remember? That's why she's scared." You don't have to explain, you don't have to cross that boundary for if a kid's watching. So it wasn't that bad, but it was part of it. But those two things were intriguing. The tie was supposed to be the fun part of the episode, and they kept putting weird um, jokes in the part where Cassian crashed and it was captured by the rebels, the little street gang, like little humorous anecdotes that weren't really landing. And I was like, I think that right there was the attempt that they were trying to do to make the show more lighthearted and feel more Star Warsy with a little more action, a little more comedy. But it really didn't. It felt like it was a bad attempt, and that they never really should have put that in the episode. So again, first episode was a D. Nothing really materialized from this episode. It was just kind of building blocks, and I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. Um, so we went on to episode 2 here. So let's move episode 2 up here to see. So in episode 2, it starts off, and I wrote this down: more rebel dumbassery. So that tells you how stupid the rebels were down there. They end up turning on each other. Cassian gets captured by one half. The other half is held out. They have no food. They're debating whether how, and one has the TIE fighter, one has Cassian, and they're debating, how to get the pieces together and end this fight before they starve to death. And there's clearly creatures in the jungle because they're finding like dismembers parts of their friends' bodies and stuff. Um, Cuts back to more of the Mothma wedding plans and setup, and more of her kind of spiraling, realizing this wedding is going to happen. It starts showing Cyril now as kind of a confident boss man. And Cyril was the security guy from the first part of Andor in the first season, who ended up kind of hitting on the ISB officer Deirdre. Deidre? Deirdre. Deidre. But they kind of showed him training like a new guy as like an old version of him, kind of an old weakling dude for the same role. Um, Back on the farm with Bix, there's more PTSD going on because a farm inspection happens, and she's kind of isolated alone with one of the lieutenants who's a very slimy Imperial, kind of abusing his power. But he doesn't do anything here. He's just kind of probing. He goes like, "Oh, do you live alone? Where's your husband?" Kind of typical people in power and influence with no check would do, but they're kind of hammering that home that she's really uncomfortable in these situations. And then it goes back to the rebels. And this is the stupidest part by far of the rebels. So the rebels decide to play their version of rock, paper, lizard, scissors, Spock, basically, for rights to who's the leader and who gets Andor. Can't make this shit up. Andor uses this moment to escape and tells this dude, the dude watching him, if you say anything, I'll kill you. Then Andor immediately leaves and starts running through the jungle, like making his way around to the TIE fighter. At no point during that time, I was like, he could have just said something, hey, the prisoner escaped. But I'll give him benefit of the doubt. He was afraid or whatever. But it was horrible to watch this. And then they play their rock, paper, scissors. And of course, one of the beasts from the jungle just comes right through and grabs two of them or one of them and just starts running away. But it was bad. And Andor uses this moment to escape and get the TIE fighter off the ground and get out of there. That's where episode 2 ended. It was such a fucking low point to me. I went from, and remember, C minus episode 1 to D plus, feeling right, like, okay, it's set up, let's see where this goes, to just hitting rock bottom right there. Like, I was like, oh my god, thank god they released 3 episodes, because I was like, Holy crap, man. If they had just released two at a time like they did in the first season and then one after that, I might have never turned the show back on. I was severely disappointed. The only thing that was keeping me alive in the show, I'm sure Acid would agree, he's just came in here. Um, Mon Mothma scenes were excellent. Everything, every political subterfuge in the wedding was well done, well acted. It kept that tone that Andor brought alive. So we went, from like D plus, like let's see where this goes, to an absolute train wreck of an episode for episode two. I found nothing, almost nothing redeeming in that episode. I genuinely think it brought it further down from D. Um, I was like, where are we going with this? And I was bored. I was very, very bored. But yes, surely the third episode, because it's the end of the arc, and that's how Andor has been, right? Two episodes building to a third. The third usually knocks it out of the park. We're good, we're good. But so far, I was very unimpressed. And like I said, my wife walked in, didn't know what the hell we were watching. Didn't even know it was Andor because she hadn't even seen him at that point. Um, but yeah, we're on to episode three, right? So let's bring out Revenge of the Sith here, and we'll put it in C. This will be first episode, or the third episode of Andor, right? So this one, I'll give you a spoiler alert. Was better, but this is by far the most controversial episode of the show, and why everyone is talking about the show. So I'm gonna rant a little bit here when we get to the ending. Um, but it was better, kept my hope for the show alive. So the spoiler alert, it's not the worst. It's not going to end up in F. So for this one, they finish up Mothma's wedding. Um, I can't remember if it was in the second episode, and I think it was the third episode, which is why it kind of reminded me of it better. So Mothma has her discussion with her daughter saying, you don't have to do this. And her daughter just goes, what do you mean? Like she's not seeing the big picture. Um, but and Acid just said Andor equals Borador. Yeah. Um, it was very boring um set of episodes to start this this set. It gets better though. It gets better, but it was boring. Was struggling to stay awake because I was sick watching it, late at night and stuff. But Mothma has a great scene with her daughter, and then she has an even better dialogue with Lutheran um, about how what did I don't want to mess up his quote, but she says something to the effect that she doesn't want Lutheran to have to kill anyone, and he or something to that nature of like she doesn't want to have like cost anyone their life, and then he goes, oh, how fortunate you've been, or how lucky for you, like basically just pointing out to how entitled she is, that he's out there doing all the hard work, arranging all these assassinations, wet work, moving pieces, and she's a little uncomfortable, with the situation. Um, I'm gonna change this music, by the way. This is weird. It's very Asian. What was that from? There we go. It's squadron music. Um, so let's see. We had the wedding, and it goes to all the way through the episode, and they do a good job at the end of intercutting the wedding, the high society stuff, with the lowest of the low stuff that we're going to talk about. Kind of showing it all happening at once. They're still doing a masterful weaving job on this show. They're showing kind of migrant oppression going on the farm. Shocker that they're talking about this at this time of our government's history right now, but it's Disney pumping politics into Star Wars again. But they basically have illegal undocumented workers, which is the farm where Andor works. being investigated by the Empire for their papers. Um, you can't make this up either. Like clearly they're just mimicking what's happening in real life. Again, it's something that I have no problem with them showing in a show. It's just the whole purpose of the show to me is escapism to this Star Wars fantasy world, not to be reminded of all the things we see, on a daily basis. Um, and then um, the mother-in-law scene, which I didn't hate in terms of how it was acting, and I really like Deirdre as a character, but Cyril invites his mother-in-law over to meet his ISB girlfriend. And his ISB girlfriend, tolerates it for a minute, and then she just throws the book down and goes, I am ISB, you will listen, this is how you will behave around your son. Stop being, for lack of a better word, a Jewish mother-in-law, and overwhelming, that sort of thing, and belittling him, making him worse, making him weak. I'm going to make him strong, basically. Um, I don't know what this purpose of this scene was. Uh, Not having that mother in the show at all would not hurt or add to anything. It just established that Deirdre is still a badass and she doesn't take no shit. It was a very long scene though. I don't think it's necessarily a bad scene. I just was like halfway through this, I'm like, what am I watching right now? Like, how is this Star Wars? I'm watching him meet his mother-in-law, or like she meets his mother-in-law. And Acid said he took it more as a fact when Lutheran was talking to Mothma. She didn't want to think or know about the killing of anyone. And oh yeah. That's what it was. I need to see the scene again, but I just remember when he said the line, I was like, that was crisp and cold and perfectly delivered. Great scene, great dialogue. But yeah, that's he was just saying how fortunate she was that she didn't have to think about the killing. Yeah. He's right on the money. That's what it was. But I didn't, I the mother-in-law scene was just kind of there. I was like, what is this? And then, of course, this is like halfway through the episode at this point. I'm like, where are we going with the story arc? And then it gets to the end. Cassian, meanwhile, is on his way back to deliver the TIE fighter finally, and he's complaining to his contact. He has no idea how to fly it, and he goes, I'm bringing it back to the farm. You can pick it up there because the point to drop off was compromised. And then they say, no, you can't go there. It's too tight. The Imperials are there inspecting your family. And much like every hero does in Star Wars, they go, well, screw your advice. I'm going to do the opposite and go save my friends. Cassian takes off, suddenly knows how to drive the TIE fighter a little bit better, and drives it home. Meanwhile, back on the farm, they're doing their inspection. And sure enough, Officer Lieutenant McRapey um, finds Bix alone in her house. He's got a guard. Bix and them are trying to run. They get kind of split up in their attempt to get out of there, and the Empire arrives early. So Bix is on her own. And, for the squeamish people that are watching, this is the time probably to turn it off. We're going to talk about some topics that are not kid friendly, but the officer for a good solid, it felt like forever, but I'd say that the scene was at least 5 minutes. Um, I'd have to like look at a timestamp to really know, but it felt like a solid 5 minutes, maybe longer. Um, Pushes her against the wall. When she fights back, he hits her. He tries to knock her out and drag her unconscious by the leg to the other room to have his way with Bix. So we're seeing for the first time in its entirety a full sexual assault attempt in Star Wars, possibly a rape attempt. Like that's what he was going for. Um, We don't see any nudity, anything like that, which I think everyone would have agreed is way way too far. Um, but they they showed the whole scene, and it's ugly, it's gritty, it's cringy, it makes you uncomfortable because you're watching what looks to be like a real sexual assault, like how it might play out if you actually saw one happening. And it's very weird placed in the same show that just had like a mother-in-law and a wedding. Like I realize that's what Andor's trying to do is push the boundaries, but um, it's a lot to take in. And there was no warning. I want to caveat this on this show. Most shows now have what I think is an oversensitive warning. They put it on things um, to make sure you know what you're watching, so your kids don't actually watch something they shouldn't. Because if I'm a clueless dad, I don't care about Star Wars, and my kid's like, I want to watch the new Star Wars. I'm like, great, cool, Star Wars for kids, go ahead. Um, I, I don't want my kid having to watch that shit. But anyway, it took place. It was on screen. Bix fights back, kills the guy, kills her attacker, and kills his guard. Cassian arrives in the TIE fighter to help kind of swoop away and save his friends. Unfortunately, he's unable to save his one friend. God, what's his name? It starts with a B. It's like It's not Bosk, but it's that kind of B something like Bassmaster or something like that. I apologize. The dude's actually a good actor, and his character was actually one of my favorite characters to watch on the show. I just never learned his name. But his friend dies, leaving, and Bix and Andor and a young kid, I think his name is Will, escape to end the story arc. So it ends with, Mothma's wedding going on at the same time as a sexual assault going on. The troopers, just some things I noticed was, Cassian randomly learned how to fly it well enough to be able to use the weapons and fly it slowly and shoot the transports and stuff and land it perfectly. Uh, I mean, I don't know why they went through this whole thing of him not knowing how to fly it. It would have been fine with him just knowing how to fly the tie and just not knowing all the new buttons. But he went from not knowing how to fly it to being like a pretty damn good pilot in it really fast. And then the troops didn't, for some reason, arrest his friend and put binders on him. When they did arrest him, they just let him run away, and they didn't even like they missed every shot. I mean, they're troopers, they missed their shots, but it felt lazy when it happened. I was like, what? Yeah, and Acid just made a good point in chat too that the sexual assault scene was just more Andor kind of being Andor, cementing its place as I'm going to talk about some dark stuff here. And then Skeleton Crew is its own thing, and it was more for kids, but it was a weird dynamic to me coming off of Skeleton Crew going back to Andor. They're very opposite ends of the spectrum. And then one reviewer I was listening to was mentioning, which they're great by the way. If you ever get a chance, go see the guys of Beyond the Dune Sea. They are uh, they have a little more like religious background um, to them personally. They don't let that affect their decision on things, but they're men of faith, and they're not as um, like one side or the other. They're not like anti Star Wars, Disney or whatever. They're more like kind of similar to my point of view of like they're open to new things and want to like Star Wars. So they see all those things, and then like their faith does influence kind of and their upbringing how they feel about different shows, and it's very interesting to listen to them speak because they come from similar points of view to me, but they're different. So it was some things I agree with them, some things I don't, but they're very open and honest and open to hearing things and want to like the things that are coming out. So I feel very empathetic to how they feel. Anyway, Random and necessary shout out for the Beyond the Dune Sea crew. They're awesome. Seth and Connor. Um, but yeah, it's coming off the heels of Skeleton Crew, and then oh, Brasso, that's the guy's name. Acid just brought it up. Thank you, Brasso. I knew it was like Bosky, Bassmaster. I was close. Brasso. Yeah, he was a good actor. I really enjoyed his character. I was sad that it felt unnecessary to kill him off there, but also given where they go for the next 3 episodes, it kind of makes sense. But we're at the first story arc, right? So, um, oh, and my previous thought was it's that Andor with a rape scene now exists in the same canonical universe as Star Wars, the Young Jedi Adventures, and like the Ewok stuff. And like it's just we're getting to we're getting wider and wider and wider. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's where we're at. So um, I gave the episode a C. Um, I thought it was of the three by far the best. Um, but of the 3 episode arc, um, I would average it out to a D. I thought it was of the Andor arcs of all of the ones that we saw. There's 4, right? In the first season, and then this is the 5th one of this season. It is by far the worst. It was boring. It brought up uncomfortable things, and further, I think, put that wedge in. And I think it's not just me. I've seen like big reviewers just decide that they didn't even want to finish the show because now it was to a point where they'd gone too far and shown them things that they didn't want to see anymore. So, and I think that's a totally valid point. Personally, I think there's a place for this stuff in Star Wars. You just have to pick and choose your spots and at least give kids a warning. Um, like George Lucas, and I'm not going to get on a high mighty George Lucas horse, but George wanted this to be for kids, always wanted it to be for kids. And each generation, it was for the next generation of kids. Um, and adults who liked it was just bonus. And he kept it in mind. He wanted adults to enjoy it too. And he had dark themes. He had Order 66 is obviously the darkest thing in Star Wars history. But what he did was he made the Revenge of the Sith PG-13, and he cuts away. Every time he does something dark, it's a cutaway, and it's an implied cutaway. Everything dark was never over gory. It was never over violent. It was always implied. Um, People were talking about more of the sexual assault stuff and going like, "Oh, but they already had Slave Leia." I was like, "Yeah, Slave Leia was something you didn't. It was implied. It was implied that she was the sex slave of Jabba. Um, he never beat her around the corner and dragged her into the next room. Like it was implied. It was something you could show to kids and explain away. And then in the meantime, you had adults going, "Oh, God, look at look at Leia." Like it was one of those things. It was just done better, I think, back then. But it was, yeah, and yeah, Acid brings up the torture scene too. It's the same, and the torture scene in Cloud City, cutaway versus watching Bix go through PTSD um, after the torture scene. Like it's implied. We all get it. He was tortured. We can add it to his character. Move on. We're in a fantasy adventure here for kids. But anyway, that's how I feel about the sexual assault. I don't think that they needed to go as far as they did to drive their point home. They could have just implied. And one of the other issues I have with the show too is it keeps taking me out of Star Wars and into real life. So we had the migration issue, whatever. I It's implied. I can get over that. It's just a connection that they're trying to preach to us. The rape scene was in your face. You could not like get over that. Um, then she uses the word rape. She yells outside to the officer, "He raped me," which I'm not going to argue didn't happen, but that was we're mixing apples and oranges and technicalities, but that was sexual assault. There was no raping, but he was going to. He was going to. Don't get me wrong. But she said the word rape, and I was like, okay, now we officially have the word rape as okay to use in Star Wars. And then there was another point, and this is just nitpicking. Star Wars has its own cussing, its own slang, and Andor, for whatever reason, can't stop saying cuss words in English. And um, oh yeah, yeah, he tried to rape me, but the main thing was the for me was the word rape being used was I thought was just I mean I don't know how else you say it in Star Wars, but I don't know why it needed to be yelled out. It made it even more uncomfortable because she used the actual word. And I know that's what the filmmaker's going for. It's not a comfortable thing. He wants it to be in your face. So well done. It was in my face. And then yeah, just the use of his normal cuss words, like when he says shit and stuff like that. I'm like, can we just use anything else from the Star Wars? Like there's already established cussing. You're just taking me out of the moment. I'm like, did he just say that? So I'm nitpicking at this point, but those are the reasons why at the beginning I always felt like I wasn't watching Star Wars. I was watching a drama set in Star Wars, and it's hammered home in this set. So they doubled down and tripled down on this one. So I felt the initial three were the worst arc in Andor in terms of everything plot, everything. Their major highlight was definitely the sexual assault, and they wanted it to be the conclusion of the episode. I felt that this was the worst build for the worst conclusion of their 3 episode arcs. And I'd say it limped out of the gate. And I'd say if I had to put Andor based on the first 3 episodes alone, where's my Andor thing? I would leave Andor here at D coming out of the gates. It was like because of the first season being so good, I wanted to see more. But I was like, good Lord, man, that was a train wreck of the first 3 episodes. And I'm like, where are they going to go from here? Whew. That was I'm glad I got through that one. Oh, those are some good PG things. Acid using the bathing suit ones. They had to touch me in my no. But I mean, in all realism, so I want to give Andor its props where it deserves it. Music, budget. The action sequence looked phenomenal. Um, Acting from Andor, um, Mothma, Lutheran, all the major hitters, Deidre, Cyril, fantastic. Well written, good dialogue. Just I feel like they missed on their opening swing here, and I'm glad that they did 3 at a time. Um, but I'm also glad because they did 3, and I was on vacation that I missed. I wasn't able to watch the 3 till like Monday night when I was sick. So I just got to jump into 4, 5, and 6 without having to just sit here and bake on the first 3, going, holy shit. Um, so for those reviewers that stepped away and said, this is not Star Wars to me, I completely get it. Uh, but I'm excited knowing where and I also, by the way, rewatched Rogue One just to kind of refresh where it goes. Knowing where Rogue One goes and, knowing how the story is going to be ramping up, I'm excited to where the next episodes are going. So we'll get to episode 4 here. And I think we're good. Before I move on, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about that crazy scene. I think we're good. I I, I definitely was cut back, but I think we're good on the sexual assault.
I have spoken.
All right. Um. So episode 4. Let's bring up A New Hope here. Put it in C to start. We had more. Cassian and Bix are now living on it's Coruscant, I believe. They're living in like the center of, the world, just kind of living like normal people, hiding in a small apartment that Lutheran uses as a safe house. And she is having more and more PTSD. Not about the guy that raped her or attempted to rape her, ironically. Um, it was more about the torturer again. She cannot let it go, which makes sense. She got violated mentally by this dude big time. So she's she's living there going through PTSD. Meanwhile, Cyril, and they what they do is a year between each 3 episode arc. So it's now been 1 year since the sexual assault on the farm, and they've been living in secret in Coruscant. Cyril is now head of uh, Gorman's corporate ladder, Imperial Security Bureau stuff. He's the corporate side of their relations on Gorman, and he's one of the higher ups there. And you're not really told how he gets there. He's not. He's living there in an apartment by himself. He's clearly being watched. He's doing things like putting string on his door to see if anyone's been in his apartment and planted bugs and whatnot. But he's working in that office. And then we, cut back to some more ISB stuff about Gorman. Um, Mon Mothma's seen going around trying to gather votes for an important vote, but she can't seem to get anyone um, to get to her side. And then Cyril is invited to a town hall, and they're listening into his conversations with his mother um, in his office, in his corporate life. And by them, I mean the rebels of Gorman, um, the underground in Gorman, are listening in, wiretapping Cyril, trying to see what's going on with him. And they approach him in the street with a little hidden message saying, "You should come to the town hall. I think you'd really like it." And listen to the locals talk about their problems. And Cyril's like, "Oh, sure." And he goes and listens. And I don't know if it's actually covered in this one or not, but he goes and listens, and he's empathetic to their cause, and he goes, "These guys are just normal people, you know." And he lets them know that they have a little meeting with him afterwards, and they ask him basically, "Are you willing to do more?" Because they think he's a good guy working for the wrong team. Um, and it's revealed that this is, I don't know if it's in this episode or the next one, but it's revealed that Cyril is a plant by Deirdre um, to be that approachable imperial middle manager. Um, Deirdre has secretly been running the operation on Gorman. She was appointed there by um, Krennic, and to keep an eye on things and make sure it doesn't get out of hand. And she's using him to get an eye on the underground. Pretty brilliant, actually. Uh, Lutheran, meanwhile, approaches Cassian and says, "I need you to go to Gorman and figure out why the Empire is there. Like, what's the deal? Like, they don't get. It's all top secret. Nobody has any idea why the Empire wants Gorman so badly. It's not for the surface value of it, and they're building an armory there. And that's what the main issue was with the town was. And I was really surprised they didn't show this. There's a massacre that takes place on Gorman in Star Wars lore, where Tarkin kills hundreds, if not thousands, and I think they say hundreds or 1,000 in the show. I can't remember. Of protesters on Gorman. What is going on with the Star Wars music here? He kills several of them. And I believe in the lore, it's with the Star Destroyer. He just like open fires on the crowd or lands on them or something like that. It's brutal. And I was wondering if they were going to show it. And I was like, well, it's Andor. Of course they're going to show it. They chose not to show it. They just chose to skip right past it, which was a odd choice to me. I thought that that would have been a really powerful moment if you're going to show that stuff, you know, um, to go and do that. So, um, you know, they kind of skipped over it, but what they're mad about is the armory that the Empire is saying they're not building. They're saying it's just a normal building. Is being right in the middle of the town, right over um, that monument commemorating those victims that were killed by the Empire. So it's very much offensive to the town. So they send Cassie in there. They're like, you're going to go pose as my buyer, a high end buyer, and go figure out what's happening over there and meet with their rebel leaders over there and see what they're ready to do. Bix, meanwhile, is left alone on Coruscant in her apartment, and it's revealed that she's hooked on some sort of drugs that she's putting in an eyedropper into her mouth to get through sleeping through the night. And their young friend Will has now uh, made a pitch to work with Saw Gerrera, and Saw accepts him because Saw wants to steal some fuel to make a bomb, basically. And the kid knows how to do it, and he's accepting the kid in if the kid will teach his other people how to do it too. So his kid is now, the kid has gone from rough life to militant rebel and working with Saw. So at the end of this episode, I genuinely felt that this was the best of the episodes so far. It felt more like regular Andor, but I still felt like this was a setup episode. Nothing really occurred in this episode to push the boundaries. It was more setting up, okay, it's been a year. This is what our characters are up to. So I thought it was a step in the right direction. It was the best episode of the season. It was even better than the third episode ending arc. So again, positive steps in the right direction. We're more at a C plus than a middle ground C here. Um, it was all boring. Now Bix, on top of just some notes I had, Bix on top of her PTSD has drug issues. She's a really hard thing to watch right now in Star Wars. So I was like, man, like I liked her character originally, and it's now being a little bit harder for me to watch. So in episode 5, like I said initially, start it here and see. We got another fake uh, that this is a fake ISB investigation, into the planet and all that stuff. Cassian goes undercover. We already talked about it. Deirdre's using this as a way to get, into there. We got Cassian is an undercover as a wealthy like buyer, and he was actually very good at like, it was nice seeing him be a chameleon and do something different than the hardcore assassin. Um, and his arc was kind of interesting because he went there trying to get a feel of what's going on with Gorman and if the rebels are ready to make a move. And then they said they're ready to make a move. What do you suggest we do? And Cassian said, don't do anything. You guys are like, you're not going to win this. You're going to lose this fight when you make a move. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of lives. Um, you don't know what you're toying with, basically. And he goes, well, what do you expect from us? What are we supposed to do? Just let this happen? And he goes, maybe just walk away. And then he goes, well, that's not very revolutionary. And he goes, maybe not. And then the guy stands up and goes, tell your boss I'm not impressed with you. Because, he's expecting a revolution type of attitude. And he got more of a, how can I survive this attitude from Andor, which I thought was a good scene. Um, Now Bix is back at home again. Again, hard to watch Bix. She's watching daytime TV on Coruscant, and again, I was left my. It just pulled me right on out of the Star Wars world. They looked like they were watching daytime TV that was put on from Hunger Games about Coruscant's upcoming Imperial Gala season, and it had this ridiculous over-the-top fashion and whatnot. And I was like, "What are we watching right now? Where this is a thing? Holy crap!" Um, I I didn't enjoy that, and she's doing more drugs, and we're finding out that the drugs are actually supplied by Lutheran to help her get through the evening. Lutheran provided her some intel um, for a job, but she didn't. I don't think. I think she didn't feel up to it, or um, it wasn't something that interested her or whatever. But he did, present she could do some things if she gets healthy, and kind of revealed that he used to hide out there, so he knows how those walls can be. Lutheran starts kind of breaking underneath the pressure from having to juggle everything. He kind of snaps at one point. He's like, "There's too many moving parts. We're gonna get caught," doing all this stuff. But he's obviously still willing to see it through the end. And then we see Saw Gerrera as like the ruthless rebel leader that he is. One of his troops tries to weasel information out of him of their next target. Saw senses this, puts the kid up next to him, and goes, "Did you teach my friend how to do all these things?" And the kid goes, "Yes, I taught him how to take the fuel out, and he can do it. I did what I was told. You told me to teach him." And he goes, "Good." And then he just shoots his friend in the head, and he goes, "This guy was a traitor. He tried to, you know, get the Empire waiting for us at this one pipeline. We're hitting a different one. Let's mount up and go." And sure enough, that's what happened. The guy wasn't uh, trying to sell them out to the Empire. And then when he's over there siphoning the fuel, the kid thinks Saw's insane because he's just straight inhaling these dangerous, noxious fumes from the fuel. And Saw goes, "Take a whiff. That's what smells like freedom to me." He's like, "You have to be crazy uh, to be a leader and to be, a revolutionary." He's like, "That's what I am." And then the kid takes off his mask, starts inhaling too, eating up the Kool-Aid from Saw. But it was actually a really good scene. And you know what? It was another C plus episode, another good setup, and it was actually better than the previous one because of Saw. Um, Not much else happened there. It was more setting up again for the third episode, but Saw Gerrera being unhinged was enough to push it over the edge to me. And there was nothing really new introduced that was dragging it down besides that TV show. But I got done watching it and I was like, another boring episode. But seeing Saw was better. All right, episode 6, final one. You'll notice nothing is hit B or A or S. So we're going to hope that changes here because normally in the first season, what we were having was like 2 C episodes and like an A tier episode or an S, at the top. So let's see what happened here. Yeah, I apologize for being sick and I have a lot to talk about. So this is a lot to go through. So episode 6, I have a lot of notes on this one. Um, So Lutheran and Cassian start off with a conversation about Gorman and Bix, which was one of the best scenes I think in the show. A plus. Lutheran basically saying, "You disappointed me um, when you went there." Cassian getting upset that Lutheran went to go see Bix and approach her when she should be healing, and then Cassian angrily yells out, "It's so much easier when I was by myself," because he goes, a Lutheran throws it back in his face and says, "If you were having such a hard time with this, why'd you say kill me or take me in? I took you in, so now do your thing. Like, buck up. This is a revolution. You're here to be my guy, not halfway in, halfway out." And when Cassian says it's so much easier when I was by myself, I legit and like Lutheran's reaction to that, I was like, that was the wrong thing to say to Lutheran. He will have Bix murdered if it focuses you up. So I was like, you need to dial that back. So I legitimately at this point thought that's the angle that they were going to, that Lutheran might kill Bix to focus up Cassian. Um, Mon Mothma's sister gets sent by Lutheran because Andor wouldn't help them to Gorman, or not sister, sorry, cousin, the one that helped Cassian in the first heist. Gets sent to Gorman to help the revolution there, set up with their attack on a little weapons supply train that's going to be coming through the town that they're going to hit and steal the weapons for. And he leaves it all in her hands. He's like, support them if they feel good. If you don't like it, walk away. But you need to help them get off the ground and start being a revolution. We need them rising up against the Empire. So he sends her there, and Mothma will only go if her lover from the first season is also allowed to go. Um, the younger Indian girl, I think her name is Sintra. Um, yeah, it's Sintra. She wants her as her partner for the mission, and Lutheran grants that, sends her there too. And again, my red flag's going off, going like, why is he allowing his two best people to fraternize again? This could be Lutheran being harsh. He's cold blooded. And in the meantime, as they're setting up that strike, um, you get to basically the Imperial Oscars gala. It was like their big event gala of the season where one of the guys is showing off all of his art pieces. And going into it, we know that there's a bug that Lutheran planted on one of the pieces. And when he the guy doesn't suspect that there's anything planted bug wise. He found out that one of his art pieces was a forgery, and he's going to go get everything inspected down to the finest detail to make sure that none of it's a forgery. And they know they're going to find the bug when they go to do that. So Lutheran is going to this gala, pretending to be his joyous self with his work partners. But when he gets there, he's going to have to do this Ocean's 11, remove this bug. Otherwise, it's going to be traced back to him that he planted the bug, and they're all going to know that he's involved in stuff. So this is, all or nothing for him. So they're going there to mingle and then do this subtle mission. They show Bail Organa. I, everyone was all up in arms about him being recast, but the actor that originally had him has Parkinson's, and they could have easily just not shown the character so far. I don't know if he does more later in the show, but I at this point I don't think they needed to recast him. They could have just not had him in the show. But so far, like, they recast him and they haven't really used the actor. Hopefully they use the actor more going forward. I don't mind the recast given that the actor physically can't do the character anymore. But like, if you can avoid using the character, just honor the memory of him rather than use him for unnecessary reasons. That was my only instinct there. Um, Mon Mothma is also at this Imperial Oscars that's going on because it's the event of the season. Um, the heist, the listening device, really intense and cool. Mon Mothma is in like a verbal joust with director Krennic while they're explaining the artworks going on, which is just back and forth beautiful dialogue between the two, knocked it out of the park. Meanwhile, the people doing the heist in the background are just subtly trying to remove the listening device. It was really tense, cool situation. Um, and then they're able to remove the device and leave by the end of the episode. It's part of the ending of the dialogue there. But on the way out, Lutheran says a beautiful line about how we should have just. She's like, "You seem happy." And he's like, we just had a major win today. My face hurts from smiling so much. And he was talking about the fake smiles he had up there. He's like, we should have killed Krennic while we were up there too. And so it ends on this nice little high note for the revolution that he protected himself. Meanwhile, they show the heist. Everything's going according to plan. The plan originally was that the only two people that needed weapons were Lutherans people. Everyone else, this should be a smooth op. They'll just steal the weapons, move them down the sewers, and be in and out. Nobody needs to be firing weapons. Sure enough, one kid brings a weapon, and when a drunk dude who's like a revolutionary starts to kind of make his way into the street where the thing's going, a guy tries to stop him, and he pulls a gun on him and goes, "Don't go out there." And then the guy calls him for his bluff, and he's like, "You better put that toy away, kid." And then he starts wrestling him over the gun, and an errant shot goes out. And sure enough, Sintra, Mon Mothma's cousin's lover, is shot and killed by the errant shot, and now turns this easy victory into kind of a somber one. They escape into the tunnels, and there's another great scene where Mon Mothma's cousin, I wish I remember her name, she just absolutely chews out the kid in a cold, calculating way, and it's absolutely beautifully delivered lines to show, basically belittle the kid and say, "You will never be half the thing that you just took away." Basically, um, it was well done, but it ends on kind of a somber note. They do succeed in stealing all the weapons, but somebody dies that shouldn't have died for it, and it really pisses off Mothma even more that it's friendly fire that did it. Um, in the meantime, um, the ISB is fully aware that this attack is taking place because of Cyril. So this is something they wanted to have happen. I was slightly confused by this because I was like, why would they want all their weapons stolen? Like, why not just put some fake defaulted weapons? And maybe we'll find out that's what happened. I don't know, but I know that the Empire wanted rebels there so they could tighten their grip. So it was weird that they set it all up, and they knew it was happening and they didn't stop it. So I was just confused as to why, because like it's probably going to be revealed, that it of the reasons why, but it wasn't immediately clear. It was implied that they just wanted to be able to tighten their grip, have a reason to. And so they forced the rebels into inaction. And so that's what I took away from it. Obviously, I could be wrong. I thought it was a little convenient too that the Aaron shot just happened to hit Sintra and when they were in the middle of the street. But plot devices are plot devices. And then the ending, which was the real cherry on the top that I did not see coming. Um, the torturer is seen returning to Coruscant as a hero to open up the Emperor loves his work and wants to widen his projects. And he returns to Coruscant with like a little victory, like a little dessert cake that he's bringing back to his office. And when he gets to his office, the lights turn on and Bix is there, and she straps him into the chair, puts the thing on his head, and turns the device to high and just leaves him on torture mode. Leaves the building, shoots an officer that was guarding it, who's like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." And then they play some badass walking away music as it's revealed that Cassian and Bix did that job together. It's unknown at the time whether it was fed to them by Lutheran or if they just decided, you know what, this is how we're going to move on. We're going to kill this motherfucker that tortured you. Um, so yeah, it ends with a nice explosion, cool walking away music of Bix and Andor working together and presumably leaving that PTSD life behind and, doing that action that's going to get Bix that clear head. Um, and I think that was the end of it. So my grade for that one, for the sixth episode, was an A. That felt like which was weirdly placed and eerily similar to the second arc in Andor season 1, which was the heist episode, which was 2 episodes building to a major heist. This one was 2 episodes building to a major heist. Um, both of them were done well. I liked the first heist better. I thought it was just edge of your seat action the whole time. This one was great, and it's in it, but different, and more political, which and more word twisting, which was great. I didn't like the heist of the train as much as I liked the heist of the original credits and stuff like that. Obviously, because it was a setup, it was less at stake. So that's the only knock. It was very similar, almost. It's almost the same format. I'm now curious where this takes our people because Gorman is obviously still very important, but like we've got no one there anymore. They've started their revolution, but Deirdre is still in charge over there, so it's got to be still part of the story, right? So um, it felt like the previous two, the C plus episodes, were just setting up this one for a home run, which is fine. That's just how they do it. As a 3 episode arc, I would put so our first one was a D. On this one, I would put it as a B because we had a C and an A. Um, it was good. It was very enjoyable Star Wars. It would definitely put it back on track. Um, the the episodes it was a little rough getting to this point though because in the first season I felt the first and third episode were very good. The second episode was filler, and then in the first season as well, then the next 2 episodes were filler leading up to this one. Um, so they had a formula of 2 filler episodes, 1 banger, 2 filler episodes, 1 banger. But the start of the show started with a bang and ended with a bang, so it always leaves you on these high points. This series so far started with 5 episodes that felt like filler, 1 banger. So it got back to where it needed to be. Um, so as an arc, I would say a B. Um, this was carried by the last episode, and I was disappointed in this arc overall because they didn't show the Tarkin massacre. I thought that would have been a great way to start this season, um, or this arc. At least some point during the show, at least show it. I mean, you're Andor, for Christ's sakes. Like that's we're supposed to show the dark stuff here, right? So it was weird that they didn't. And again, I was confused a little bit on the only thing that kept this from being like an S tier was that, and like I was confused of um, the Empire's motivations, uh, and they keep sticking the mother-in-law into some of the episodes where I'm just like, we're done. I'm done. I'm done with the mother-in-law. Like, let's get her out of there. We don't need this anymore. We've established these characters. So halfway grade and my final thoughts. Uh, so overall, as a halfway grade, I would say C plus for all 6 episodes. There are some episodes that clearly brought it down, but it finished with a nice bang and intrigue as to where we're going. And I will say that because I know that the Rebel Alliance is just ramping to where it's going to ramp to, obviously we know the story, that the second half of Andor is got to have K2SO involved, right? At some point, which I'm very much looking forward to. You're going to have more and more Rebel resistance, more and more Empire restricting control, and you're going to have more and more Death Star buildup, right? So knowing where it's going and knowing that it ended on a high point here has me excited for the next 6 episodes as to what they're building to. And now a lot of the stuff that I saw in the trailers hasn't even occurred yet that I was excited for. So that's another reason why I think it's more in like it's been average so far for Andor. Um, this was more on par with the first season, getting it back on track. So I think it can finish nice and strong and get it back to that nice B A that we're looking for. But so far, that was my thoughts on it. And again, keep in mind when Cassian said, it was easier on my own, because we know that he doesn't end up with Bix. We know that he ends up being a loner. So right now he's at kind of a high point of I'm helping Bix. Bix and I are in love. And we know that the war is not taking him that way because if he had Bix um, stashed away in the galaxy waiting for him somewhere, he would not have done what he did in Rogue One. And so we know that's going to end with tragedy at some point. So we'll see where that goes too. We're building up a lot. The pieces are there. They can finish it strong, but they got to stop wasting episodes on a bad arc. Um, that's the only problem with their arc system. If you set up 2 episodes to set up a banger, the banger's got to bang, like it did in the last episode. If it doesn't bang, it's a huge waste of time. And final, so we got Andor finishing in C+, and I just wanted to give some shout outs. Lutheran right now, Skarsgård carrying the entire franchise. Best acting, best character in this story, better than Andor. And that gets me on another kick with, I don't want to rant too much about this. I don't understand why the show is called Andor. And why Disney has some obsession with terrible titles, where they just name the main character as the title. Um, I don't know what you would want to call the show. You whatever is fine. The first season felt like okay, we are following the adventures of Andor, but it's really about the rebellion. This season, 1000% is Andor's on the screen like 1/5 of the time, maybe. And his exploits are not the meaningful ones that are happening right now. It's more about Bix. It's more about um, Lutheran Gorman setting up all that stuff. How Lutheran's able to stay under control, showing Mothma losing her cool in the Senate when everyone's taking imperial oath and stuff, which I even forgot to mention. Um, it's just one of those. It's going in the right way, and it's just the people that have done a good job so far are Lutheran, Saw Gerrera, Cassian, Deidre, Mothma, Krennic. They all slammed their acting scenes. Bix too slammed it. It's not the actors, it's not the characters. It's more of the choice of what to focus on for the writing that's so controversial. It's going in the right way, slow burning that direction. So hopefully we're in the right spot. But in my opinion, keep an eye on that that thing that Cassian said about how it was easier on my own, and Lutheran's face when he said that, because Lutheran had that same look when he killed Mon Mothma's friend, and I was like, I feel like Lutheran's gonna be he's gonna be the one to kill Bix, and Cassian's gonna find out and be the one to kill Lutheran. I don't even know if they can. That's my gut feeling from watching the show. Again, I'm looking forward to more. Um, don't hate the show in any way. I'm being overly critical as it is for each individual episode, but I really felt like the weakest part of Andor was the start of this season. Um, Overall, it doesn't move the needle for me on where I felt with it as a B show. Um, it is very, very slow. Still feels the same if I'm watching a drama about Star Wars or set in a Star Wars universe rather than I'm watching Star Wars. It did, however, make me enjoy Rogue One even more. When I rewatched Rogue One, um, I and I'll be honest, when I first watched Cassian um, in Rogue One, hated his character, liked K2SO. Cassian was just there. He was my least favorite of the entire Rogue One group, except, well, that's not true. Bodhi Rook was my least favorite, but Cassian was just there to me. I was like, who is this guy? He's supposed to be a badass, but he's like, who is he? I don't know. I don't get it. And when they announced that they were doing a show about Andor, I was like, huh, why would they choose everyone's least favorite character? What the fuck? They could have done anyone else. They could have done Chirrut and Baze, much more interesting. But I do care about Andor now. I feel like there's a backstory for Andor. And so when I rewatch Rogue One, I'm like, cool. It added flavor to a movie that I liked. So there's always that. But people that are saying this is the best Star Wars, um, I think they're only saying that because of how well it's written and how well it's acted, and not necessarily taking into account what Star Wars is as a franchise, which is a Star Wars fantasy adventure, and it's family friendly. It always has been, and that's okay. Um, Lucas himself was going to go do an HBO series about the Star Wars underworld, and I'm pretty sure it was going to be probably similar to this. He was exploring adult themes, but the thing is HBO is a subscription service that's for adults. So putting this on Disney Plus is a little wild to me, but that's just my personal opinion. Um, everyone has the right to feel differently, and I'm not going to argue that the quality of the show and the storytelling has any factor into how I feel about the show. It's mostly that it doesn't feel like I'm watching, like when I watched Rogue One, I felt like I was watching Star Wars. Um, when I watch Andor, I feel like I'm watching an intense political drama. So, that's how I feel. I'm looking forward to the next few. And so that's where we're going to wrap up for this one. And I will be doing the next three next week on Thursday.